So after working in the white collar workforce for the better part of 10 years, I started woodworking and I went off on my own. And I want to go into just some ramblings on why I decided to leave and why I think that for me, this was the path where I could utilize all the skills that I picked up at my white collar job, but have the autonomy and not have the monotony that goes along with a white collar job. So one of the things that I noticed in office jobs is, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the book BS Jobs, but I listened to an interview with the man that wrote the book, and it really struck me, this kind of idea and why there are so many BS jobs. And that was one of the big catalysts for why I really wanted to leave that whole sector of the workforce. I didn't want to work in a big corporation anymore, even if it was a cushy office job. I knew that just based on my experience in a big organization that a lot of those devolve into BS jobs simply because of the nature of business. And here's my theory on why that happens. So if you have a business, let's say it's an online retail store, right? That's where I used to work. It was online retail, and there was, I think, over 10 websites where we were selling stuff. Now, it was a huge amount of volume that was going through there. And some of the businesses were more, so it was all owned by this big umbrella company, right? And some of the businesses were more profitable than other ones. And it was a massive amount of product that would move through there. So basically, when you have a company that is that large, it is very efficient. The problem and the reason that there's so many BS jobs that get created by a company like that is because when you start to scale, it becomes difficult to see who is essential and who is non-essential. For instance, let me give you an example. There was a lot of people involved in marketing, and some of the marketing initiatives were highly profitable, and then other ones were not profitable at all. An example is mailers would go out. So sometimes, you would have a meeting of, 5 or 10 people, talking about a mailer. Let's say, 5, 10 people spend 2 hours, back and forth talking about it. Then you have, 5 people involved in actually creating it, the designing, taking photos, doing the video for it. And let's say that they have a less than 1% conversion rate on that mailer. Let's say it makes, $10,000 for that one. Well, that might be a net loss in terms of the actual manpower that went into that mailer. But let's say on the flip side, you have another company within that same umbrella organization, and they're just killing it on, a certain set of products. Well, all of that is masked, and the speed of business is so quick that sure, you can do an analysis and see how effective one marketing initiative was over another, and they did do that. But by and large, there's so many inefficiencies that get masked because other areas of the company compensate financially and efficiency-wise. So inevitably what happens is you have a lot of people in the organization that their work isn't super crucial. It's not high pressure. It's kind of, do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, so long as you get your stuff done, which doesn't take that long. everything works, everybody gets paid, the company works, and they get to basically if you have inefficiency that is created in one part of the company, my theory is that you don't just basically get more and more efficient. You have an inefficiency that's created in another part of the company. And there was a really interesting data set that we kept in my department. And so I worked in imaging, and I wanted to see if there was a correlation between the amount of hours that people worked versus the amount of products that actually went through our department. And it was actually quite shocking to find that the amount of hours did not have a one-to-one correlation versus the amount of product that was going through our department. You would think that, the more product that is coming through the department, the more that people are working. Well, it wasn't the case. Those people had full-time jobs. So regardless of whether, we had 500 products come through the department during the month, or we had, 5,000, they worked almost the same amount of hours. Now, granted, obviously the department grew as the amount of product that we received grew. So there is some correlation, but once you have those people, you have a workforce of 16 people, the amount of hours that those people are working does not fluctuate that much between the busy season and the slow season. And so what you have is BS jobs, because really you need those people, but you don't need them 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, every single day. That's the thing. And as the manager in the department, I started to realize that, yeah, I could make these advances, I could work really hard, and I saw a direct impact from the work that I was doing. But there was also weeks where I could literally sit there and watch YouTube videos, and so long as there weren't any major fires, I could be, perfectly fine just doing the absolute bare minimum. I could work kind of like those Twitter employees that you see. I could work, my half an hour or an hour a day, and it wouldn't really matter. And that sounds super nice, but it's also very, very demotivating. And that was one of the biggest reasons that I wanted to get out of that sort of job. I wanted to be in a position where I could actually utilize all my skill sets, and I had that autonomy to where my success was going to be based on me. It was going to be me coming up with ideas, me providing, the product, the service, whatever it was, but I wanted that autonomy back. I didn't want to be just another cog in a corporation, even if it was cushy. So something else that I really got tired of in that sort of job was sitting at a desk 8 hours a day. Now, granted, I worked in the photo department, so we could take pictures, you could get out, you could do shoots, but by and large, it was still a desk job. And after a while, it gets really old. There's something to be said about physically working with your hands. And I think for me, the best case scenario is when I have a hybrid, when I can, sit at the computer, I can, whether it's write, come up with a product idea, do some design work, but then I also enjoy the actual physicality of working. I enjoy actually producing something with my hands, where at the end of the day, I can, touch it, look at it, and be like, okay, I made that. And when I was working in this office job, even though there was work that I was proud of, a lot of it, I didn't have this like sense of accomplishment that comes with actually making something. And there's also another interesting phenomenon is the fact that you can basically undo and redo something that's digital endlessly always gives it this feeling that it's incomplete in some sense. I could, take a picture and edit it, and then I could come back to that picture and think, well, I could edit a little bit more, I could clean this up, I could do this. There's never that real sense of just completion that comes when you actually make a physical object out of wood. So another topic I wanted to touch on is I feel like there is a bit of a false dichotomy nowadays between blue collar work and white collar work. And what I've come to understand in the last few years is that really you want to have a broad skill set. You don't want to be completely useless with your hands. And there's actually a big mental skill set that you learn doing work with your hands, because sequencing in woodworking is very, very important. So typically before I take on a project, I'm doing that project, number one, in the design phase, and then number two, I'm actually doing it in my head and seeing, okay, well, if I do this step before I do that step, then it's gonna work out better for, X, Y, and Z reasons. And when you start doing these, bigger projects, like I built a set of French doors, you really realize that sequencing a project is a form of mental exercise, and you develop another way of thinking. And I do a little bit of programming, and I liken it to kind of like programming knowledge, where you have this system and you have to walk through these logical steps, and if you do something out of order, maybe it can be done, but a lot of times you'll really shoot yourself in the foot if you do something out of order, or if you don't take into account a variable that you just didn't think of. So I think that actually working in the physical world is a great way to build that skill set of actual project sequencing. Whereas in the digital world, a lot of times there's not an imperative to do that as much, because you have the ability to always undo and save multiple copies of something. Basically, like, you don't have that material cost that's also on the line. Or let's say, for instance, you're building a door and you screw up the project at a very crucial point. Well, there's an understanding when you're dealing in the physical world that once a project goes past, there's like a point of no return. So if you screw it up here, you know that you're gonna have to start all over. So it makes you really go through your head the actual steps that you're going to be doing, and you start to see that there's a lot of things that you don't think of, you don't really take into account, and it just teaches you this kind of systematic way of going through a project and really understanding the scope of a project. So for anyone who's debating leaving the traditional white-collar workforce, I would say it's really hard to give advice to people because everybody's situation is just so different. But one thing I would say is that it's been probably one of the hardest things that I've ever done in my life, but at this point, I don't see how I could ever go back to an office job. Some days, I'll work a 10, a 12-hour day just trying to get projects done, trying to stay on top of, calling leads, doing design work, billing people, trying to get paid. And even with all of that headache, I still wouldn't go back to that cushy 9 to 5 just office job. For me, I don't see a way to go back to that. After experiencing just the level of autonomy, it would be very, very, very difficult to ever want to go back. If you're debating dropping your current job, I would say obviously look at your situation, see what you can do, and start planning your escape. And just know that all the skill sets that you pick up, whether you're working at a fast food restaurant and you're just working with customers or you're working with employees, it doesn't matter what kind of work you do, you can use all those experiences in something that you create yourself. There's no skill sets that I've picked up working any of the jobs I have that I regret having, or that I regret even investing time in picking up those skill sets. I feel like everything I've learned, from photography to programming to woodworking, everything that I've learned, I've been able to use. And I'm still constantly just picking up new skills and trying to hone my skill set, make myself a well-rounded person, in the fact that I can basically take any problem in front of me, and even if I don't have the skills to necessarily solve every problem, I at least know what it's going to take in order to get from point A to point B. That just comes from experience, comes with just familiarizing yourself with different processes, with different industries, with how things are made, and getting out of this mentality of, just these like black box type of services, or just getting out of the mentality that someone over there knows how to do it and I don't know how to do it and I'm not interested. I think curiosity is such a valuable thing that we have as humans, and the best thing to do is just to nurture that curiosity. Figure out how something is made. It doesn't mean that you have to, go down that path and, become a CNC machinist or whatever it is that you're interested in. It just gives you a good understanding of how things actually come into being, from the initial idea, from the initial concept, to from when it arrives in your house, maybe in an Amazon box. So with that, if anyone is looking to start their own business or just get out of the white collar rat race, good luck to you, and see you on the next one.